G'day everybody, it's Mark here from reporting from, well, from somewhere in northern Laos on the border to Thailand, in a place that I cannot even begin to pronounce. So I won't even try. Welcome to lesson 4. Look, this is going to be another recording from the first group that I did. It's a very good session. So just once again, just let you know that there may be some references there that obviously are not that relevant right at the beginning. But look, sit back, relax. I hope you enjoy it. This is a very important, another one of the very important mechanisms that we test for with this testing. So sit back, relax, and I hope you enjoy it. Feedback. I look forward to hearing some feedback next weekend when we have a live Q&A. Okay, thank you. Talk to you soon. Bye.
What are we talking about here? We're looking at really the body's preferred fuel source, carbohydrates or fats, and this is all about energy production. It's all about weight loss. It's all about mental health, mental and physical health. Okay, is it an important system? Of course it's an important system. We're talking about oxygen. We're talking about getting oxygen into the head. We're talking about into the brain. We're talking about getting oxygen into the body, into the tissues. If we don't have that, we have nothing. So it's quite an important system. We got a little bit of stuff to go through. And next week we're going to be doing a Q&A, as you probably already know. Now, one of the things I think as we go through, we haven't done a live Q&A session like this before, but once we go, I think one of the best things to do is as we go through this, just make some notes, and it might even be something you can do is send me some notes if you've got some questions before we even run this Q&A session. Maybe you can send me some of these questions so I can be prepared. I might need to do a little bit of research, who knows, but it'll be trial and error how we go with all this. But it's just a thought I had then. I thought, well, maybe it's not a bad idea for you to, as you go through, make some notes, and then when we get together next week, and hopefully we will, and hopefully a lot of you are going to get together, we can have a really good session, and we'd be a little bit more prepared rather than sort of trying to think of questions. Okay, what are we talking about here? We're talking about dynamic number 3 in the context of the 5 systems that we're looking at here. It's the third most important. Okay, now when I did this training, one of the first things we were told is that for years the biomedics, the work they were doing, and Steve Denk was doing back then, they really just focused on electrolyte balance and cell membrane physiology. Those are the really 2 main systems that they focused on, and then they sort of started as they did more work and started to do more research, and I guess more experience in the area, they started tapping on these other systems, because they obviously realized that as time went on, that there were some more important systems, and we needed to add them on, and I guess add them into the context of the whole thing. So although energy production is important, it's not as important as the cell membranes. It's not important as electrolyte balance, and could be really, in reality, could we probably move forward and just focus on electrolyte balance and cell membrane physiology? Probably so, because if we start fixing these, we're going to start fixing some of the ones below, including energy production. But energy production, when we're talking about mental health, we're talking about depression, we're talking about energy, physical, mental energy. Obviously, it's something that's important. It's important to all of us. So we're going to cover it, and we're going to go through, and we've got a fair bit of stuff to go through. So yeah, it's an interesting one, especially because there's rarely an assessment I do without one of these out of balance. Okay, where does the work come from? It comes from George Watson. I've talked about George Watson before. George was a psychiatrist, and I guess a lot of this work, and George also coined the term fast and slow oxidizer. This is where this work came from originally, and a lot of this work was like, I guess a lot of these things were sort of, a lot of this stuff that he came up by mistake. He wasn't purposely looking for this. He started to see these patterns, and he started to correlate some of these issues and some of these imbalances with some of his mental and psychiatric patients and some of their issues. And this is essentially where a lot of the work come from. George was really focusing on the mental side of things, the psychiatric side of things, but also with this imbalance, there's a lot of issues with weight and weight loss and weight loss and weight gain. if you like. So of great interest to a lot of people for obvious reasons, because there's not many people I work with because the majority of the people I work with are females, and there's very few females I have ever worked with, regardless of how big or small they are, that don't tell me they have a weight issue. So it's going to be of interest to everybody. George wrote a book way back, Nutrition and Your Mind. It's a pretty good book. It's a little bit hard to get. I did have it. I bought it secondhand copy. I don't have it anymore. I lost it. God knows what through my movements and moving around and whatnot. So it's something I think it's really worth, especially if you're interested in, or you have a particular interest in more the mental side of things, depression and anxiety and whatnot. It's probably going to be of more interest to you than anything else. We're not going to be doing too much talking. He doesn't do much talking about weight loss or the fact that, the issues with gaining weight because of a slow oxidizer or whatnot. But it's very, very interesting. It's quite interesting when he starts to talk about how it affects the mind. And, when you think about it, if I were to look back at all the work that we do here, we're talking about oxygen delivery to the body and to the mind. It's like it's everything, and nearly every system we're looking at, and nearly every assessment I do, what I'm looking at here is either too much oxygen in the system that we can't use, or too little oxygen in the system in the first place. And this causes all sorts of problems for obvious reasons. Okay, so have a dig around. Be interesting if you can find it. I think I bought mine on eBay. You may be able to find it on Amazon, a second-hand copy, but probably eBay is probably going to be closer to where you're going to find it. Okay, we're talking about what we're talking about it here. So energy. What are we talking about? Energy. We're talking about ATP, adenosine triphosphate. We're talking about the body's energy production factory, the mitochondria. And do we have any balances in there? What's going on? If we do have an imbalance, and we're going to run into all sorts of problems. So we're looking at the better oxidation metabolic pathway, which uses fats, and we're looking at the tricarboxylic acid pathway, which uses sugar. I'm not going to go through every one of these things here. We cover it in a little bit more detail later, so you can have a look. Just before we go any further, I will just make a note that a slow oxidizer imbalance is by far the most common imbalance I see with this energy production control mechanism. Okay, I do a lot of assessments. I've done a lot of assessments over the past few years, and rarely do I see someone as a fast oxidizer. Okay, now I find that quite interesting. I haven't really sort of dug down and really had a really deep thought about this. But I think there's probably some clues there in regards to the lifestyles that we live these days, and the correlation with everyone, with so many people coming across as a slow oxidizer. Okay, so you don't often hear me talk much about a fast oxidizer because I rarely come across it. Nearly all the time it's a slow oxidizer. So everything I'm talking about, if you see me write posts and whatnot, would normally relate to being a okay. So essentially, what are we talking about? What are we looking at here? We're looking at we're examining the operation of the energy machine, the mitochondria itself. The mitochondria within the cells, and we're looking at clues that point to imbalances of Krebs cycle. Okay, the energy production cycle, and this cycle, as we said just now, has two pathways. Okay, the tricarb or the carb or the fast oxidizer pathway, if you like, and the better oxidizer, which I would say the slow oxidizer. So what the terms I'm going to use from now onwards is fast oxidizer and slow oxidizer, just sort of simple. Okay, I'm not going to go through talking about everything, every little detail here, because you can go through and read this and you can come up with your questions afterwards. Okay, I don't want to just parrot everything off here, but essentially, of course, if one side is not operating efficiently, the body can shift and use the other side. This is natural, there's no problem. So we have a situation where one side dominates. This is usually the case when some intermediate metabolite is not present to run the mitochondrial machinery, or some element has thrown a monkey wrench, to speak, in the picture, and it's messing up the machinery. Specifically what element, we don't get down that deep. Do we really need to with this work, I don't get down to that sort of detail with this, but the main thing is it's understanding whether we do have an impact on another. Okay, and if we do have one, if we do have an imbalance either side, we're going to start running into issues with energy production. Okay, we're burning too many fats for energy production. We'd be different. We're going to be deficient in burning carbs, and then if that happens, we end up with a blood that will lean quite alkaline. Okay, and we tend to be a little bit more hyperglycemic. Okay, they're not burning sugars, and these guys will be classified as slow oxidizers and ketogenic. On the other side of the test numbers showed that they were tricarb side, or the carb burner, or a fast oxidizer, I should say. This was inferred that we're primarily burning carbs for fuel and not using fat so well. And these people tend to be more hypoglycemic, of course. So they're burning all the sugars, but they can't burn the fats. Okay, and when this happens, and this is an interesting, quite an important part of the whole picture, this is when blood tends to lean a little bit acidic. Okay, and they tend to be classified as fast oxidizers or glucogenic. Okay, they're just burning too many carbs. And I guess in the context of the testing that we do, this is where it gets quite interesting. This acidic, the fact that this will push blood, acidic, and we talk about, drinking, we talk about all these different things and how we can try and control our pH of our blood, and yet if we have an imbalance in this area, just like with cell membranes, we tend to have quite a big influence on blood pH, and we need to understand that. Of course, we need to not only just understand that, but we need to include that in the assessment so that we don't go off on the wrong track. Okay, I talked about this just now, but this concept fast and slow oxidizers came from George Watson. Okay. So he essentially he was a psychiatrist, and what he noticed with a lot of his patients with their neurosis, that when they started eating the wrong foods in relation to in relation to their metabolic rate, if what he found is individuals did great on carbs but poorly on fats, especially. He noticed that the blood was typically more acid, and he termed these individuals fast oxidizers. And he found that nearly every one of his clients that had this issue was also directly related to their neurosis and their mental or psychiatric issues. And if he started fixing these imbalances up, he started to find that their neurosis and some of their psychiatric issues started to come back into balance, and they started to improve and started to fix them up. It was quite an discovery. Just a note here, the correlation to pH. One thing I just want to highlight, emphasize, we talked about this a lot in the past when we talked about pH, acid, alkaline and whatnot. Just remember, when we're talking about pH, we're talking about acid, we're talking about things moving faster. Okay, just remember that, because this is important. It's an important part of the whole makeup. It's just understanding and the context of everything we're doing and measuring all this stuff is to understand alkalinity. The more alkaline we are, the slower things move. The more acid we are, the more fast things move. Okay, energy moves very, very fast in an acid environment, and this can have obviously lots of impact for your mind and impulses and mind thoughts and God knows what. Okay, it's quite an important part of the picture. Okay, let's move on and let's start thinking about so if you ever wondered what's the best diet to lose weight, to lose fat, how can I tap into the tens of thousands of calories of real energy I carry around with me every day? This is going to start being, this is where I'm sure some of you are going to be a little bit more interested. Why can't I burn this body fat no matter how hard I work out or however strict I am with my diet? I'm sure this relates to some of you guys out there. What am I doing? What have I got to do to drop this weight? Okay, how can I have the body of my dreams and sanity at the same time? What is the underlying physiological cause of most depression, anxiety, and mental illness? What is the key to happiness? At least part of the puzzle anyway. Okay, and part of the puzzle is to understand the relationship of energy production and metabolism and brain function and oxygen. Okay, what does mental performance and emotional health have to do with burning fat? Well, it has a lot to do with it, as we'll see. Fortunately for us, burning fat, emotional health, and mental performance all go together in a balanced body, as we know. Okay. We're going to be talking about energy burn rate. What do we mean by energy burn rate? We're talking about the rate in which we burn through different energy sources and which type of energy sources, fats, carbohydrates, and proteins, because they significantly impact on the amount of energy we have to think, move, exercise, and also, of course, how we feel emotionally. Okay. Your metabolic tendency refers to your body's tendency to burn through carbs for energy quickly or slowly. If your body turns through carbs quickly, you may be classified as a fast oxidizer. If your body burns through carbohydrates slowly, we tend to be classified as a slow oxidizer. Further, if we tend to not burn through either source very efficiently, we can be classed as a suboxidized, and we really don't have much energy in either. We have no mental energy and we have no physical energy. Okay. So for maximum energy production, we have to have a balanced oxidation rate, which means our body has a steady stream of energy available to it at all times. Okay, so we're efficient at metabolizing all fuel sources. We're efficient at metabolizing carbs. We're efficient at metabolizing fats, and we're efficient at metabolizing proteins. And make sure, obviously, we've got the diet in the first place to be able to provide that. So if we were to simply speak about this, if we burn through carbohydrates too quickly, fast oxidizer, due to poor diet choices or ineffective digestion of proteins or fats, then we cannot tap into those most abundant sources of energy, which is protein and fat, that could come from your diet and body energy reserves. If we burn through carbohydrates too slowly, we're slow oxidizer, then our body lacks all the pieces of the metabolic puzzle needed to burn fat and protein for energy. Metaphorically speaking, now this is interesting because we need everything, but let's think about carbs as the kindling needed to start the fire. The enzymes in our saliva are the match that initially lights the kindling. The kindling provides some intermediate warmth and light or energy, but it's not the real fire. Carbs aren't the real fire. Your body fat and dietary fats and protein are the major fuel for the fire. They're the big logs that will give you the abundant warmth and light, or the real metabolic energy. Okay, so without the carbs to start the fire and the kindling, we're not going to be able to burn the big logs, and we're not going to get the real fire. Okay, so it's the energy from the kindling that literally dims in comparison to the potential fire from the big logs. But you can't get the fire going with the big logs. Anybody that's been camping will know this. We can't just start a fire up with the big logs. It just doesn't help. We've got to start with the kindling first. So it's all important, okay? And obviously we've got to have essential digestive system working properly, and we have to have the fuel sources coming in the first place. And we talk about the fuel sources in the digestion. If we don't have the proteins, if we don't have the gallbladder, we're not going to have the fats. If we don't have the hydrochloric acid, we're not going to have the proteins. This is all important, obviously, so you can start seeing how all this stuff starts to come together and starts to make a little bit more sense, and you start to understand the importance of looking at this at an extreme holistic level, which will work. Okay. Blood glucose test. This is one of the tests that we use. This is a big one, of course, because this is all talking about, well, are we burning through sugars quickly, or are we burning through glucose quickly, or are we not burning through glucose quickly? Okay, so the blood glucose test is a test that gives us pointers as to whether we are in the fast or slow oxidizer imbalance. Okay, we can also correlate these blood sugars with the bricks or specific gravity using the refractometer. Now we're going to be talking that we're going to have a separate section on this. Okay, it's quite a big area. We're going to be doing that a little bit later down the track. Once we start doing some testing, we're going to start talking about the bricks and using the refractometer to sort of dig a little bit deeper. We won't go into that too deep now. We don't need to, but once we get down a little bit more down the track, we'll be talking about that. Okay, to understand, is this a real problem, or what are we looking at here? We got to look at a lot of different things. Okay. So when we're looking at the glucose test, and what I'm looking at to try and determine whether we're in this zone of fast or slow oxidizer, we're looking for a level between 70 mg/dl on the low end, and up to 110 on the high end. Okay, so the lowest blood sugars are usually obtained when food has been eaten for a number of hours. So this is why I ask everybody to do a fasting a glucose test. It also, obviously, if we do some rigorous sustained exercise, we're also going to be burning those sugars up. The highest blood sugars is if you do a test like 1 to 2 hours after eating a meal, you'll get a bit of an idea of how far the sugars are moving up. Okay, but I like to do this testing, a fasting test. It's sort of, obviously, if you haven't eaten for 12 hours, 14 hours, we get a bit of an idea of how well your body is clearing these sugars, and do we have a sugar problem? Do we have a glucose problem? And although, you know, we've got the high end up there, 110, what I'm looking for really is probably 100 or less. Anything over and about 100, I'm sort of moving into the slow oxidizer zone, if you like, you know, through experience. 110, you know, it's I sort of use this as a guide, but you know, I don't really want to get up towards 110. We are moving just there. Now, as far as the sugar burn rate here, so the more sugar burning produces. Oh, well, this is where it gets a little bit interesting. We talked about the acid produced through being a fast oxidizer. So as we burn through sugar, we produce more carbon dioxide, which translates to more acid. Carbon dioxide converts to carbonic acid in the body, and it acidifies us. It's the biggest buffer. It's what our body uses to be able to maintain, you know, to help maintain pH in the bloodstream. And CO2 is a byproduct of the carbohydrate metabolism. This is why it produces a fair bit. Okay. Just an interesting note there. You look at scuba diving. If you look at if I've never done scuba diving, but if you did do scuba diving, you will notice the differences in how quick people will use up their oxygen. Okay, and I can almost guarantee you, if you were to see people using up oxygen much quicker than others, that their bodies are probably just more of a fast oxidizer. Okay, they're using up, they're much more quicker to use up the oxygen than they would be if they were a slow oxidizer. Okay, much more alkaline blood. Okay, just a note here. When more carbon dioxide is being produced due to burning high levels of carbs, the acidic CO2 will find its way into the tissues, and due to the fact that saliva pH is a reflection of what's happening at the tissue level of the lymph system, you will find that saliva pH will tend to be a little bit on the low side, okay, when this is happening. So one of the first things you look at, because what happens is the CO2, it'll permeate through the tissues, and it'll find its way into the lymph system. And you know, the saliva is a reflection. You know, it's not just a reflection of the lymph, but it's more of a reflection of the lymph in your tissues. So as soon as you start seeing low saliva pHs, this is one of the indicators. You start thinking, what's going on there? How can the saliva be so low if it's quite low? And you'll usually find, I don't often see a lot of low CO2, a lot of low saliva pHs. But when you do, it's not just necessarily going to be the fact that we have an issue here, but it's one of the indicators. It's one of the markers that you put it on your mind. You go, no, I'll keep that on my mind, and you start to see if you can see any other markers that may contribute to this, and you start to look at the oxidation rate and stuff like that, and see if it makes sense. You know, is this person eating carbs? Have a look at them. You know, you can start to put these together. And also when we have this happening, because of the extra acid in the system, the body's going to breathe faster. Okay, we talked a lot about this in the pH side when we did the pH lesson. Okay, so what we're looking for ideally is anything between 16 and 18 is when we have a breath per minute, is when we have a sort of balanced system. Anything above that, we're pushing a little bit acidic. Okay, our body's going, get that out of me, I've got too much acid, and my blood is pushing a little bit too much acid, and we need to get that out of the system. Okay, so anything above 18 is a strong indication of we're a little bit too acid. It might not be the fact that we're burning too many carbs. This is going to happen when we have problems with gallbladder and bile, because bile is very, very alkaline. And typically, if I see a high breath rate, more than anything, it's probably it can be to do with the fact that we've got a blocked bile duct. And if we clear the blocked bile duct, everything starts moving again. We're adding this alkalinity into the system, and the breath rate will come straight down. So it's not just related directly to being a carb burner, but it's an indication. And like I said earlier, I don't often see carb burners anyway. So when I see a breath rate of say 23, 22, and I don't see that often, the first thing I'm going to look for is markers in with gallbladder and bile. Okay, so it's a huge pointer. It's anything that's high or anything that's very low in breath rate is going to be a marker in regards to looking at. Okay. The reverse holds for someone that's running a little bit slow oxidizer as well. Okay, 14 breaths per minute. I would say even probably 16 breaths per minute, but most probably 80, 90, 95% of my clients are below, definitely below 16, and I'd say a lot of people are way below 14. If you were to do your breath rate right now, I can almost guarantee the majority of you watching this, going through this lesson now, would have a breath rate of probably 12 or 11 or even lower, which is a strong sign that your body's probably just a little bit slow. It's oxidizing. It's not too fast. It's not producing enough acid. You're not burning through enough carbs, and you're a fat burner. Now, when we say fat burner too, we're not necessarily saying that your body's capable of burning through fats either. But that's what is preferred from one reason or another. It tends to want to burn through fat. So you can start to see that if we're not a carb burner, and our body tends to want to burn fats, but we have problems with gallbladder and bile and whatnot, and our digestive system, well, where do we get our energy? Well, we don't. We have no energy. We can't provide energy from our carbs, and we can't provide energy from our fats and our protein. Well, if we don't have any hydrochloric acid, we have no protein. So we have no energy at all. You start to see how this all starts to come together. Okay, little note here, little stop note. I'm going to start adding these. This is like, whoa, take notice here. Our kidneys are our first line of defense when it comes to buffering pH. Okay, so as soon as I see an altered breath rate anywhere out of the range of between 16 and 18, the first thing I'm going to think is what's going on with the kidneys, because the kidneys are responsible for the second to, or the nanosecond to nanosecond control of blood pH. Obviously, we can't allow these pHs to go either way. We just can't allow it to happen, because you'd be die. I think at about 7 base points or something, like point drop. If you drop or you increase your pHs by 8 base points or something, you're going to be dead. And the kidneys manage that quite well, especially when we're younger. But as we get older, our kidneys struggle a little bit, and they tend to engage the respiratory system. We tend to start, and when that happens, we know. So if our breath rate starts to be altered, we must know that the kidneys are struggling a little bit too. Okay. And this is the case for most of us. Once we hit 35, 40, we're going to have that going on. And I guess the more slower we are, the more higher we are, the chances are that our kidneys are struggling more and more. Okay, so it's just another sign. It's another marker. This is where a bit of logic comes into it. Okay, kidneys are the first line of defense. Breath rate is the second. Okay, our breath rate is probably second to second, whereas our kidneys are more nanosecond to nanosecond. All right, some of the slow oxidizer symptoms. Just going to have a glass of water. Okay, what do we got here? Okay, some common symptoms: high cholesterol, high triglycerides, type 2 diabetes. This doesn't mean you have type 2. This doesn't mean because you're slow oxidizer you're going to have this, but you will find that nearly every person with type 2 diabetes is going to be a slow oxidizer for obvious reasons. It's not burning through sugar. Weight gain, another big one. We're not burning through sugar. Lack of energy, okay, physical and mental. Chronic fatigue, another big one. High blood pressure, another big. Metabolic syndrome. High blood sugars, of course, we're not burning through sugars, cardiovascular disease, which is part of syndrome X, low body temperature, mental disorders, depression, ADD or ADHD. This is interesting one. I see this a lot. The ADD or ADHD. This is a massive one for for energy issues. Gallbladder problem. We talked about gallbladder problem just now. Premature aging associated with glycation and insufficient vital oxygen. I mentioned this just now. Just because we have type 2 diabetes on that list, it doesn't mean if you're slow oxidizer you have type 2 diabetes. But what I would say that if you are a type 2 if you are a slow oxidizer and you haven't and you're not type 2 diabetes, you are possibly on the way. Okay, so this is a warning sign that we need to jump on. Type 2 diabetes doesn't happen overnight, but it happens eventually if we still struggle in this area. Okay, so it's a marker, but it doesn't mean just because you're a slow oxidizer you've got type 2 diabetes. So I don't want you to start freaking. Okay, some fast oxidizers. Overdependence on glycogenic energy production, carbs. Okay, deficient and ketogenic, deficient in fat energy production, of course. Premature aging associated with free radical peroxidation of fatty acids and with glycation. Okay, so this is more about oxygen out of control here. Okay, we've got way too much oxygen going on. Low body temperature again. One of the things you'll notice when we go through the testing with the carb burner and the fast burner and the slow oxidizer, or the carb burner and the fat oxidizer and the fat burner, there tend to be quite similar symptoms on either side. Okay, this is once again why we don't just go by the numbers. Okay, they're going to give us an indication. We need to look further. We need to go, well, yeah, okay, we've got depression on one side, we've got depression on another. We've got this on one side, we've got low body temperature here, we've got low body temperature there. What's going on? That's okay. And that's the same with some of these other imbalances. It's not a problem, but it's one of the reasons why we need to look a bit further sometimes. Elevated fats because we're not burning them. Blood sugar decreased, obviously a big one. Okay. A general fatigue again. If you're anemic, I'm not sure why I popped that in there, but if you're anemic and you're a fast oxidizer, your body responds very, very well to increased proteins from vitamin B12. Shortness of breath because you're not able to utilize the oxygen. Depression, again, that's another similar one. Anxiety. Irritable when hungry because your body just like, whoa, I'm screaming for energy, I'm burning it through too quick. Weight issues. Under all, similar again. Okay, some slow oxidizer biological markers. This is when we do this testing. These are the markers that we will use when we do once we get to the testing side of things. So urine pH less than 6.1 and saliva pH greater than 6.9. Breath rate less than 13. Now I put breath rate less than 13. Why did I put 13? I would probably go a little bit higher than that, but I think, like I said, I think the majority of people that I work with, the breath rate is it's below 14, below 13, the majority. And so I've lowered it a little bit, I guess, but I would say even 14 or 15 is probably something I would need to look at the other markers as well, but I think I've lowered it a bit because it's I'm trying to get more of a solid marker there, especially for you guys to sort of stand out as far as, well, if we're below 13, you can almost guarantee without looking at anything else that we've got a slow oxidizer issue. Okay, breath hold is greater than 60 seconds because we don't have enough acid, we're not producing enough acid, so our body says, well, I don't need to breathe, I want to hold on, I need to hold on to the CO2 to be able to maintain blood pH. Okay, why breathe? This is why we talked about it with our pH system. When we're very alkaline, the body, we tend to have, a lot of people tend to have sleep apnea because the body doesn't need to breathe. It's got so much oxygen, but it doesn't have enough acid to be able to release that oxygen into the tissues and into the brain. So what happens? It doesn't want you to breathe. because as soon as I breathe, I'm going to release CO2. What's CO2? It's carbonic acid. What's carbonic acid in the bloodstream? Well, in the body. It acidifies the bloodstream. Okay. Fasting glucose greater than 100. So I did have the 110 before, but like I said, with this testing that I do, I'm looking at 100. And even to be honest, when we start seeing anything of 90, 93, 94, 95, I'm still the first thing I'm going to look at see if I can find any other markers to be able to validate whether this is we're looking at a slow oxidizer here. Okay. Elevated blood pressure. Some fast oxidizer biological markers. So urine pH lower than 6.3. Saliva pH. Oh, sorry, urine pH greater than 6.3 and the saliva pH less than 6.6. We talked about just a little bit earlier about the increased carbonic acid in the system when we start to burn through a lot of carbs, and that comes through in our saliva pH. You will notice too, of interest, and you've probably seen this, there's always the body maintains perfect balance, molecule by molecule. If it comes in with a molecule of acidity and toxin, it will balance that out with a molecule of alkalinity. Okay, and they compensate. So if the tissues are acid, the blood will be alkaline. If the blood is alkaline, the tissues will be acid. This is why you see these opposites all the time. Okay, and this is why I will say I'm not sure if I talked about this when I talked about the pH, but issues, but I'll mention it now, is for every molecule of acidity that comes into the body, one of the first things the body will do is, if it can't deal with that toxin or that acidic molecule, it will wrap it up into a fat cell and it will store it in the tissues. But every time it does that, for every molecule that it sends away to the tissues, it'll add another molecule of alkalinity into the bloodstream. So as the tissues get more acidic, because you're wrapping up this acid and you put this toxin, whatever it is, this acid wrapping it up into the fat cell and sending it to the tissues, the body knows that at some point it needs to release it back into the bloodstream to be able to deal with and got rid of when the time is right. Okay, so it stores it away for a rainy day. So you can start to see as my tissues start getting more acid, and I store that away in the fat cell. What happens is my bloodstream gets more and more alkaline, because I'm not only taking this molecule of acid out of the bloodstream, which is making it more alkaline alone, I'm also adding another, or maintaining or keeping hold of another molecule of alkalinity, so that the blood gets highly alkaline as your body gets high and stashes away more and more toxins. Okay, this is another one of these areas that can really throw you when you start looking at the acid alkaline balance. Okay, who knows this? Very few people knows it, but it makes sense. What's the point of storing it away? And then your body, how is your body ever going to release it back into the bloodstream to be dealt with by the liver? And unless it's got the environment to do so, so that it makes sure it's not designed to have all this toxic crap. It doesn't know it's going to be stored away for months or years, but it will. And in that time, your blood will get more and more and more alkaline as we get more and more and more acidic. All right. Blew me away when I learnt that, and it makes sense, and I see that correlate everywhere in all the work that I do. Very hard to explain this to people because people just can't get their head around it, but as we go through this work, and as you'll see, you start getting your head around this stuff and you go, oh my holy moly, unbelievable, it makes sense. Breath rate greater than 18, because we're a fast oxidizer, we're producing more acid. All right, more carbonic acid. What are we going to do with that carbonic acid? We've got to vent it off. How are we going to vent it off? We're going to increase our respiratory rate. Get rid of this acid. So our breath rate is going to obviously increase. Okay? and our breath hold is going to decrease, of course. Okay, um, because we don't want to hold on to this acidic. Okay, fasting glucose is going to be low or lower than 70. That's obvious because of the sugar it's burning off. Our blood pressure is also going to be a little bit lower. Okay, some of the foods to avoid if we're a slow oxidizer. Okay, avoiding any sort of polyunsaturated oils. I mean, we should be avoiding this anyway, of course. Okay, salad dressings, margarine, mayonnaise, fried foods cooked with veggies, oils, coconut oil, real butter, and unheated virgin olive oil are okay. Okay, when I say real butter, we're talking about grass-fed organic butter. Okay, this is a superfood. Coconut oil is pretty neutral. Okay. And virgin olive oil is obviously pretty good, but when we start looking about all this other stuff, it's just full of crap and full of sugars and God knows what. Okay, and of course avoid eating meals predominantly full of sugars and starches and whatnot. Okay, it's going to be a big deal for obvious reasons. Fruit juices, okay, liquid sugars, obviously not a good low oxidizer. So limit your fruit. Limit your fruit intake as well. My recommendation is one piece of fruit per day, and even then, we got to remember this day and age, with marketing and with selling any sort of produce or any sort of food, they've got us. They're really nailing it with their marketing and with their design of these products. So we might, we talk about hiding sugars and foods and processed foods, and they're tricking us, and we don't realize, when we buy this and we're getting all these sugars and stuff like that. But do we also know that this happens this is quite common with a lot of fruit as well? The designers of these fruits these days, and the way that a lot of fruit is engineered, is not natural. Okay, they're very high in sugar. They're very high in sugar because we need to be addicted to them, so we're all buying more. Okay, it's not a lot different than buying, putting sugar in processed foods or putting sugars in chocolate bars or whatever. We want to eat more because we're addicted to the sugar. Well, the same thing can happen with fruit. Okay, if we were to eat a natural apple that's grown naturally and found in the bush or found in the wild, it certainly won't be sweet. It will certainly have some great minerals in it, but it won't be sweet. It'll be sour. And I think that will be the same with most fruit. Okay. So bananas, red apples, and all these sorts of things, they're going to be very, very high in sugar. So just be aware of that, especially if you're a slow oxidizer. Liver and other organ meats with a slow oxidizer, because we have trouble burning through that stuff. Alcohol, well, this alcohol is just liquid sugar. That's how the body sees it. Soft drinks, of course, any sort of drinks, sugar drinks and whatnot. Seafood such as prawns, lobsters, and clams can be a bit of a problem for the slow oxidizer. Peanuts and peanut butter, that can be good for a slow oxidizer. Okay, food to avoid if you're a fast oxidizer. Sugar, again, there's some similar stuff here. Items like corn syrup and honey, fruit juices, large quantities. I mean, this is a no-brainer for everybody, really, but it's more specific. It's a lot of this stuff that we're going through here is common knowledge for really anyone. I mean, no one's going to be drinking. Fruit juices, sugary juices, soda pop, all this sort of stuff isn't going to be good for anyone. Okay, coffee, tea, and alcohol, polyunsaturated oils again. Okay, similar stuff. I mean, junk. Okay, meals consistently predominantly of sugars, of course. Okay, foods to implement if you're slow. Fish, poultry, eggs, dairy products, all veggies, appropriate fats. Okay, coconut oil, real butter, unheated virgin olive oil, and foods to implement if you're non-starchy veggies. Veggies like zucchini, squash, broccoli, blah, 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 blah. You see it there. Eating some carbs early in the day isn't going to hurt so much anyway. One of the things with while either being a fast oxidizer or slow oxidizer is keep a glucometer handy. Because one of the things you can do with the glucometer is just get your head around what is pushing you either way and where are your sugars at any time of the day, especially when you start getting into this and you start doing some measuring up front. Um, uh, because one of the things I've found when people when clients start doing some measuring, you know, I mean, a lot of people say, well, I can eat an orange, I can eat a kiwi fruit, it's no problem. But you'd be very surprised sometimes, depending on how your body's dealing with the sugars, how quick this can throw your body out of whack. And even though it might only be or seem like a harmless, um, kiwi fruit especially, I've seen kiwi fruit throw people way out of whack. I've seen oranges throw people way out of whack. I've seen oranges give people insulin headaches, and because there's so much sugar. And some people can deal with it, no problem. Some people can't. But don't assume. Okay, so if you have an assumption, you measure that assumption. All right. If you say, well, yeah, that's okay for me, that's okay for me because I know because I read it somewhere. It's okay to eat that. It's okay to eat 2 pieces. Well, how do we know that? How is that related to you? Did they write that book for you? Did they test you? Do they know who you are? Of course they don't. So test these assumptions, especially if things aren't working. If things are working and you're happy and you're healthy and you're vital and you've got good brain energy, you have clarity, well, there's no problem. And the chances are you wouldn't be talking to me, or you probably wouldn't be doing this unless you're working in the industry. Okay? So when we know things aren't right and we're still looking for answers, we start measuring, we start doing more of this so we can start breaking down some of these assumptions. Okay? And proving them. Some supplements that can help help us lower magnesium malate. Okay, and we've got some contraindications here. I've talked about this before. Once we get to the testing and the protocols, we're going to have a much more detailed list. Okay, but this we're just covering some here. This is just some general stuff, general subs that you can start looking at just to start getting used to, get your head around. But I'm going to be going through. We're going to have an extensive list of supplements that you can use for all of these imbalances. Some of them are going to be empirical labs, a lot of them aren't. Okay, empirical labs are great. They do some wonderful products and they've designed some wonderful specific products for some of these imbalances, but it's not about empirical labs as such. It's about making sure that you're getting the right supplements, and they're not contraindicated with some of these other imbalances. And you can see I've sort of highlighted a few of these. Okay, tyrosine's a really good one, especially if you got. This is great for your mental energy. You don't take it too late in the day because it's pushing you more. It's pushing you a little bit more of catabolic. It's pushing you a little bit more fast. Okay, it's going to spark up the brain a little bit. Okay, it's great, but you don't take it at night time. But tyrosine, L-phenylalanine. I don't know if I've got that in there. I know I'm contraindicated. But anyway, I'm going to have the whole list, and you're going to have that. And it's a massive list, and every contraindication is going to be on there. And really, it's going to be, and it's just a matter of you trial and playing around with this stuff, and the most important are going to be at the top. But everyone's going to be a little bit different. Everyone has a preference. Everyone's going to have some differences, and we're not going to be able to measure for every one of those differences either. So it's not. I've said it so many times. This is not about this is what it is. This is what I've got to do. I've got to do exactly that. Okay, we've got to experiment and we've got to trial and error, and we've got to work out what works for us. Okay, so we have guidelines with this work, and we're going to get very, very close with a lot of it. And once we start fixing up our digestion and stuff like that, well, we're not going to have much need for a lot of these supplements anyway. But it's trial and error. Okay, use your nous. Be intuitive about this. How do you feel? Does it work for you? Does it make you feel crap? What's it doing to your numbers? And only you can do this. And it's going to be a process. It's going to take time. And you get to the point now where with me, for instance, I get very intuitive. I just know. I trust myself. I know how to listen to my body. I don't do lots of testing. I don't need to, because it's an intuitive thing. But you have to learn to be intuitive. It takes time. And it takes measurements, it takes monitoring, it takes tracking, which is what we're going to be doing, and what I do with my clients and what I do with my coaching clients. We track this stuff, and we're learning to be intuitive, and then all of a sudden we start to learn how to pick up the little markers and the little intuitive thoughts, and you start to trust these thoughts. You start to trust your intuition. You say, you know what, I'm going to grab that supplement now because I need it. I'm going to grab that supplement, I'm going to stop that now. I don't need it. Did I look at a marker? Did I look at... No, I'm intuitive, and it works because I feel so damn good. All right, which is obviously the marker. All right, some supplements for fast oxidizer. B12s can be a great one. B5. I made a little bit of a typo there. I'm sorry, but anyway. What else we got here? L-glutamine. Glutamines can be quite good. I mean, gluten especially, it's something that we'd use for a catabolic. So when we start looking at fast oxidizer, often, not often, but sometimes we'll see it correlate that with a catabolic. Okay, everything a little bit too fast and too much oxygen. Okay. Some slow. Did I just go through this? No. Okay. Some slow oxidizer supplements. Banabichrome, Flow A. This is the magnesium that Revisa used. Half a drop it before breakfast and half a drop it before mid-morning. Okay. This is an Empirical Labs product here. Beat Flow. Magnesium malate. Oh, I'm not sure I went through this just now. If I did, I do apologize. I'm not going to go through this whole thing again. But I'm sure I went through this just now, some of this stuff, but I'll check it out afterwards, and if I've completely ruined it, I will redo this, but I'm not going to go through and just redo the whole thing. I think we'll be okay. Vitamin A, L-tyrosine, tyrosine, I'm sure MSM. I think I've just added some more to it. Some supplements to avoid with a slow oxidizer imbalance. Okay, B5. So we avoid that. We add it to the L-histamine and vitamin E. How exercise can help a slow oxidizer specifically. Lifting weights can be a good way of burning through your glucose. Okay, so this is just something you can do. It'll lower your insulin levels and teach your body how to burn glucose. And sometimes it's just a matter of doing this. It's just a matter of teaching. It's like all of this stuff. It's almost like we've got to reteach the body to do some of this stuff. And once you've taught the body, it just takes off and does it. Okay, our body tends to, it likes the status quo. It doesn't like change. I mean, who likes change anyway? Not many people do. But at a biochemical level, our body doesn't want to change. If it's managing things, it's managing to be stable. It's managing to keep homeostasis. It doesn't want to change too quick. So we've got to teach it. We've got to convince it by being consistent about what we do. And one of the things you can do, especially with a slow oxidizer, is by using some weights, and we should be doing some resistance work anyway. Okay, what I'm going to do, I'm just going to quickly whisk through an interesting some information that came out of Tony Howell. Now, Tony Howell is a guy from America who did this course a long time ago, and Tony's responsible for developing the coalition. So the Coalition for Health Education, the program that that we all use to upload our information on, and the bloods, and most of you hopefully are registered on the coalition. That's it. This is Tony Howell's thing. Tony is also he does a lot of work with weight loss. He's also got a book called Kick Your Fat in the Nuts, and I recommend that if you haven't already seen this book, have a look, because it's brilliant, and it sort of covers a lot of very similar to work. I mean, because we've done the same training from the same place, it's the same material, so you're going to see the same sort of stuff come through. But this is a really great demonstration, if you like, or an example of some of the issues with insulin spiking, if you like. Okay, and we've got some graphs coming up. I'm not going to go through in detail. I want you to go through and have a look at this. But one of the things I see, one of the big problems I see, not just with weight loss, but with anything in the body that's really thrown out of balance, And this is this insulin spiking. Okay, and if you do it for long enough, you're going to get type 2 diabetes. I think it's a 13-year process. I'm sure I think it's about a 13-year process of spiking this insulin. So type 2 diabetes starts when it can be starting when you're 5 years old. It can be starting when you're younger. If you're shooting your insulin up and you're spiking insulin, um, this I see is causing all sorts of problems, not just weight problems, but mind problems, mental problems, physical problems. God knows what. It really throws the body out of whack because the body has to respond to this high levels of, when I say insulin spiking, I'm talking, spiking your sugars, which then you're going to be spiking your insulin. Okay, it's a big deal. Okay, insulin's a very, and also insulin. Well, I think we covered that in a minute, but insulin's very, very strong in an alkaline environment. It's very, very weak in an acid environment, which is why, once again, having this acid alkaline balance is very, very important for insulin. But this is powerful stuff, and it can really throw your body out of whack if you're not careful. Okay. So high insulin levels. So when we're talking about the high insulin levels, we're talking about carbs spiking insulin levels. Okay, and we're talking about higher, starchy foods. Bread, pasta, rice, baked goods, potatoes, white potatoes, fruit, desserts, and whatnot. We're talking about these sugars that are going to spike. We're not talking about all carbs. We're talking about carbs that are going to convert to glucose very, very quickly in the body and shoot the glucose level through the roof, and then ask the body, then the body has to respond with high insulin levels, with pumping lots of high insulin levels. Okay, and this is where a lot of the weight loss issues come into it. Okay, because, well, as we'll see in a minute, as we go through some of the graphs, I'm not going to go through this word by word, but anytime we eat these carbs, our insulin levels will spike, and when we start spiking our insulin levels, not only do we have high carbs and high insulin when we start shooting our insulin level through the roof, as insulin levels come up, our body stops burning fat, and this is one of the big ones with weight loss. So if you're working, or you're going to start working and helping people with weight loss, you really need to understand this, and you probably need to go and buy Tony Hell's book on Kick Your Fat, because it's brilliant. Tony works primarily in weight loss. He was a personal trainer, and he's also a producer, a movie producer, and he's going to be coming out with a movie called Why Am I So Fat? And I think they're in post-production right now. It should have been out this year, last year, whatever, but it's still running a little bit behind. But why am I so fat? Okay, and you're going to see a lot of this stuff come through, a lot of the work that I talk about come through. And to be honest, when I did this training, the view was that we should all be getting, everyone wants to lose weight, and everyone's quite willing to pay to lose weight. And not many people are willing to pay to get healthy, I can tell you. But everyone's willing to, because you can't, it's not something you see. It's everyone's willing to spend a lot of money on how they look and the cosmetic side of things and their weight loss. So when this movie comes out, there's going to be a massive draw on people like myself to help people apply this technology on losing weight, and you'll see the whole movie is based on doing this testing and understanding these metabolic systems and being able to balance them and whatnot. So look out for that. Why am I so fat? Why am I so fat? I think that's what it's called. Do a Google on it, and you'll see. But might get a bit of an idea when it's going to be released. But Tony Howard, very, very clever, very, very special person, and he did an incredible job with the coalition system to help us guys sort of work through this a little bit better. So I'm just going to go through quickly. So the more carbs taken in, the higher the insulin spike. Liquid carbs, of course, are going to be really bad because they're going to hit the blood. Okay. Now the big thing with insulin levels. Okay. Now when we shoot up the insulin, the glucose will come down very, very quickly, but the insulin levels tend to stay higher a lot longer, and this is what causes. Okay. And the problem, as long as your insulin levels are high, your body's ability to burn stored fat is impeded. Okay, there are more hormones involved. Obviously, there are more things involved in this, more hormones involved in this whole process. But we can view high insulin levels as a trigger that makes it all go to hell. Is a simple way to explain it. And also, high insulin levels tend to send a signal to your body to store the fat as well. So not only are we storing it, but we're not burning it at the same time. Even though the glucose levels will come down and the insulin levels are staying up, what happens then? Well, insulin's up. We're not we're storing fat. We're not burning fat. Glucose levels gone down, so we have no energy from glucose. What happens? We tend to have no energy at all because we're not tapping into any energy. So no glucose and no access to stored fat means you don't have a good fuel source, and we have what we call the zone of misery, which is high insulin, low glucose, and the body says, well, I ain't going to tap into this fat no matter what. This is why you can if these people that are having, well, I'm not eating hardly anything, but what I am eating is shooting my insulin level through the roof. But why am I not losing weight? I'm not hardly eating anything. But what you are eating is spiking insulin levels, and therefore you lose weight. It's just not going to happen. Okay? So what happens? Well, we'll look at the graph in a minute, but what happens is we crave more carbs. So we have some carbs, we shoot our insulin up, it knocks our carbs to hell, our carbs come down, we're not tapping into energy for fuel, we're not tapping into fat for fuel, so we have no energy. The first thing we do is go and grab some more carbs. The whole cycle, the whole deadly cycle of this cycle of spiking our insulin and wondering why we have no energy. Okay, and each time we do that, we tend to be grabbing, we tend to grab more and more carbs because we need another hit of energy. Okay, we're going to look at some examples. Quickly go through. So here's an example. 8 a.m. carb count 79. We have a bowl of oatmeal, a whole wheat English muffin with jam, and a glass of orange juice. Some people would say it's not a bad meal to have in the morning. That's not too bad. So what happens? Here's a graph here. Okay, here's Penny. We're talking about Penny here, and if we look at the blue line here, this is the glucose. Okay, so the glucose shoots up. This graph here, the grey shaded area down the bottom, it just represents the level of when we start going into, or sort of going out of, the fat burning zone. All right, so we're looking at that grey area as the fat burning zone, the blue line as the glucose, and the green line as the insulin. You can see as we shoot, glucose comes up, and the insulin follows. Okay, so the insulin will follow, but you can see as the insulin comes up, gets to a certain point, it knocks the sugar out of the system, and the sugar will start coming back down. But look at the insulin. It takes longer. It takes a lot longer to come down into the fat burning zone, and it's probably 1 o'clock in the afternoon before we start getting our body back to the point where it starts burning fat for energy. Okay, so from 8 o'clock to 1 o'clock, once your glucose starts coming down and you don't have any more energy left, you're not getting your energy from sugars anymore, you can start seeing from about 10 o'clock to 1 o'clock, this is what we call the zone of misery, because you have no energy from glucose, you have no energy from fats because the insulin is too high. We grab another meal at 10 o'clock, we say, well, we're a bit hungry, let's grab a banana and a glass of pomegranate. So this is what happens. Our sugar starts coming down at 10 o'clock. We have this meal and we shoot our insulin levels up again. What happens to insulin? It stays up. It starts to come down and it shoots back up again. Okay, and we can start seeing this glucose spiking here. Okay, we've got another spike. Glucose comes down again, comes down by about 12 o'clock, I think it is. And what happens is insulin stays up, and once again we start getting into the zone of misery where we have no sugars, but insulin's still high, so we're not tapping into into energy. So what happens again? We have another meal, and we have the same thing happening again. We have another meal at 1 o'clock, and we shoot the insulin. The sugars go back up through because of the carbs, and insulin. Well, it hasn't even come down; it's just gone back up again because it's reacting to the sugars. Okay, and you can start seeing this go through this afterwards. You can start seeing in more detail. So what happens at 8 p.m. at night time when this has happened all day long? Um, we grab some ranch dressing. We grab some small salad with ranch dressing, which is full of sugar, and 2 rice cakes, which is probably the most insulin food on the planet. Okay, we get down to 8 o'clock here. So we spike the sugar. Insulin hasn't come down all day. It starts to come down towards the end of the day. Um, oh, I don't know what's happened there. Hang on. Oh, you're going to have to. Sorry, I'm not sure what's happened there. My little thing spazzed out. You're going to have to have a. You're going to have to have a reader. I do apologise. I'm not sure if I can go back. We've got a little bit further. You can start to see this whole process. Okay, read through this afterwards, but you can see this whole spiking process here where sugar spiking and insulin is followed. Okay, and throughout the whole day we haven't got to the point where insulin's got down enough into the fat burning zone to start burning fats. Okay, so it's not even about exercising as such, it's about getting that insulin down, it's about not spiking it so much. Okay, we start looking at alternative meals, and we start looking at cutting carbs right down. And this isn't for everybody, of course. This is for people that are more having problems with insulin resistance. This is going to be more slow oxidizers. This is something that doesn't happen overnight. Alternative, looking at the alternative graph, and we say, look, initially when we started having breakfast at 9 o'clock or whatever, we do shoot sugars up a little bit, and insulin does come up a little bit. But as you can see, if we manage our meal throughout the day, when we are having problems with these carbs, and this is happening with so many people, we tend to maintain insulin, just on the edge or just below the into the fat burning zone. And when we do that, we not only have energy because we're burning fat, but we're obviously losing weight as well because we are burning fat. Okay, so this is one of the big areas of weight loss, and one of the big things you're going to see Tony talk about in the movie, I'm sure, about this issue with spiking insulin. And you'll see, you talk to people like some of these gurus out there. My mind has gone blank of some of these gurus, some of these natural health gurus. They all talk about insulin spiking being a very big problem, not just for weight loss, but for everything, because of how it throws the body so out of whack. Okay, so go through that and have a look, and it's just really just to give you a bit of an appreciation for what can happen when our sugar is a little bit a bit out of control. Okay, and with as a slow oxidizer, and having so many clients of being a slow oxidizer, and so many clients being a slow oxidizer and having problem with weight, you can start to see how important it is to really watch your carbs, and I guess train your body to stop using so much insulin. Because if you do this over a period of time, you're also going to run into the problem with type 2 diabetes, and your body just won't produce enough insulin in the first place, and it struggles, and it just shoots insulin through the roof. It can't do that forever. It will run into problems down the track, and this is when we have type 2 diabetes, and this is when we've got to take some radical action. We probably should have taken that way before and really start moving into plant-based diet and actually do some damn exercise so that you can start to manage this whole process just a little bit more. Okay. You can, okay. Oh, as I was talking about before, insulin has a very strong effect in an alkaline environment and a very weak effect in an overly acid environment. Okay, this is another thing just to look at. If you've got a lot of problems with insulin problem, and a person's very alkaline, well, then we can work with reducing the alkalinity and not having such a strong effect, or well, reducing it or increasing it, whatever, to be able to try and manage this issue with insulin insulin spiking. Okay, A little bit more stuff there, more detail. Uh, okay, to the end. Oh, one of the things about is 3 p.m. carb cutoff. This is really the last section on this. One of the things that I recommend to be able to counteract this whole process of insulin spiking and trying to train the body to be able to calm down a little bit in this area is to try and for some this is going to be difficult. But some people want a glass of wine in the evening and whatnot, and it's going to be a little bit difficult to do that. But look, if you want to lose weight, I can tell you now, it's more about what you put in your mouth than doing exercise. Exercise is a little bit part of it, of course, to keep healthy and keep fit. Um, but if we can sort of cut our carbs or starchy carbs, we can't cut all carbs. You can't. Carbs are everywhere, but starchy carbs, say some 3 o'clock in the afternoon until breakfast time the next day, we're giving our body a good sort of 16, 18 hour break, and in that time we can bring that insulin level down. And when we bring that insulin level down, we start tapping into burning fat. And this is how we can lose weight overnight, by sleeping. It can happen. All right. And we wake up in the morning, we actually have some energy because our body's at that zone. We're actually burning fats. We're burning fats for energy and we're losing weight. So I'm just going to whisk through this very, very quickly. My throat is I'm still getting over this flu a little bit, and by the time I get through an hour of this talking, I'm struggling a little bit, and I'm feeling it come through now. So I've still got a little bit of a way to go before I'm back on track. I am struggling a little bit now, but have a look. Just read through that. It's one of these things I'm sure that Tony's going to be covering on this movie as well. It's a simple thing, but this is about train your body, get that insulin down. We don't want to be doing these. Can you imagine the kids that are having all these soft drinks, not only throughout the day and spiking their insulin, it'll be going through the roof. Can you imagine? You can start seeing why by the time they get to 15, 20, 25, 30, they start getting type 2 diabetes. And you can start seeing them putting more and more weight on because their body's not getting into that zone. They're not burning fat. Their insulin's so high for so long. And not only that, I'll talk about that when we have a look at I'll talk about the issues with, with your immune system and your body's, how your immune system shuts down when we spike sugar. So it's not just an immune system thing. It's a fact that you're not burning fat at the same time. So you can start to see why these kids are running into so many problems with issues with illnesses and all these problems with putting on too much weight and reactions to things and God knows what, and mental issues and psychiatric issues. Is it any wonder they have no immune system all day and they're not burning fat all day? And then they end up getting to the point after a number of years of doing this spiking where they have manifest type 2 diabetes. Okay, and this is when it gets a little bit harder. Not that that can't be turned around, of course, but trying to turn around a kid that's been, eating sugar and boosting and shooting his insulin through the roof for the last 15 to 20 years, it's going to be a lot harder to turn around than it would be if you start to do it from day one. Okay, so once again, it's not necessarily the amount, it's how quick. It's a glycemic load that you're putting onto your body, and it's just shooting that insulin up. We don't want to shoot it up once. We've got to keep it down. This is why it's so important. And I'm going to get through to the end. Look, I think there were a couple of little, maybe a couple of typos, and maybe I covered a couple of things there with the supplements twice. If I did, I apologize. If I did it in class, it wouldn't be too much of a big deal, but we're doing this recorded. But I'm not going to go back and do the whole thing again. But what I will do is I will go back and correct the printed version out, if that's the case. I'll check it out. I can't go back and fix this because it's a voiceover. But what I will do is adjust the PDF. So I do apologize if that's the case. I am struggling just a little bit with my voice again, and the last thing I need to do is go through this all again. So And also too, if I haven't picked something up, please just remind me. Okay, guys. Well, thanks very much. I'm going to end it here, and I look forward to catching up. I'll have to get a schedule out so we can make a time for next Sunday or next Monday or whatever when we're going to do this Q&A, and we can go through not only the Q&A for this session, but Q&A for the case study which I released yesterday. And I think as I guess you'll probably agree with the case studies, especially yesterday's one. There's, we're starting to see some quite valuable stuff coming through, and these case studies are going to start help pulling some of this stuff I'm talking about on these lessons and start making a little bit more sense about the whole thing. So thanks very much. We'll talk to you all guys very, very soon. Okay, goodbye.